A silver rupee spun through the blistering cantonment sky, flashing like a dare no man expected to be met. Moments earlier, a British colonel had hurled it upward, his final flourish after scoffing that rifles were no place for brown hands, least of all a woman's. Below, Asha, hunter-born and steady-eyed, centered herself on the coin's glittering climb. One breath, one pull, one shot could splinter not just metal, but the sneer of an empire. Would the sound that follows be an echo of humiliation, or history being rewritten? Asha grew among the Shikari Hills, where teak forests rolled toward a horizon stitched with tiger trails. Her father, the princely estate's gamekeeper, taught her to read the language of rustling leaves and distant cracks, knowledge that meant life or death on hunts that fed whole villages. When she turned 12, he pressed an heirloom Lee Enfield into her slender arms and guided her finger until the recoil became familiar, respectful, almost kind. In quiet clearings she learned that a bullet's path is a promise: see true, breathe true, strike true. Yet outside the jungle's hush, another law ruled, one written by red-coated officers and whispered through cantonment drawing rooms. To them, a native was to obey, a native woman to fade into the background, face veiled, eyes lowered. Still, rumor of Asha's uncanny marksmanship trickled beyond village fires, carried by sepoys granted leave. Curiosity turned to irritation when an eager lieutenant suggested inviting her to the regiment's annual shooting exhibition, a spectacle designed to showcase imperial precision before planters, missionaries, and maharajas alike. The afternoon she arrived, pale dust rose around her sandals as convoys of phaetons lined the parade ground. Union Jacks draped over bamboo poles snapped in the summer wind while brass bands piped martial marches. Onlookers gathered beneath canvas awnings, British ladies fanning themselves, Indian nobility measuring every gesture, soldiers on duty shielding their sun-bleached eyes. At the range's edge stood the colonel, tall, medals gleaming, mustache sharp as the bayonet at his hip. He inspected Asha with the casual contempt reserved for curiosities, an indigenous woman daring to tread on imperial sport. With a half-smile, he proclaimed for all within earshot that the heft of a service rifle was never meant for feminine limbs, certainly not for those born outside the Empire's favored race. The audience rippled with polite chuckles, confidence thick as the heat. Asha answered with silence, neither bowed head nor trembling hands, only the calm focus she wore while stalking leopards at dawn. Even as humiliation and fury burned beneath her steady breathing, she kept her gaze on the rifles racked nearby, choosing not to hear approval or derision. When volunteers demonstrated rapid volleys, spent cartridges clinked onto iron trays, but every sharp report felt distant to Asha, like thunder before a storm breaks overhead. She knew the moment would come when the colonel's bravado required a spectacle. Whether from arrogance or entertainment, he would hand her a weapon and set a test meant to fail, because failure, to him, would seal the narrative that women and colonized subjects belong behind the firing line, not upon it. Within that certainty lay her opportunity, a single shot, witnessed by the very voices that had dismissed her, to pierce more than a target. With each tick of the brass-cased chronometers, anticipation coiled tighter, ready to strike. Sweat pooled at the nape of Asha's neck as the iron sun drifted toward late afternoon, yet her hands stayed cool, almost chilled by purpose. The colonel's steward presented a freshly oiled Lee Enfield, the bite of gun grease cut through the scent of trampled grass. Asha accepted the weapon without hesitation, cycling the bolt in an unhurried rhythm her father had drilled into her before countless dawn patrols. Each metallic snap rang across the parade ground, a foreign cadence in a place that believed it had heard everything worth hearing. She stepped onto the firing platform, a simple timber rectangle elevated just enough to expose her to every scrutinizing gaze. Officers' wives angled parasols for a better view, sepoys froze at parade rest, solidarity hidden behind stone-still faces. Even a distant phonograph seemed to stall, its record refusing to turn while protocol was so brazenly rewritten. The colonel hovered beside her, silver rupee dancing between thumb and forefinger. No guidance, no courtesy, only a smirk that declared her failure pre-written. Asha's pulse answered with deliberate beats. She remembered lining up a boar at 14 through branches alive with cicadas. That shot had traveled farther, under worse light, through thicker doubt than any she faced now. She adjusted the sights for a breeze hinted by restless banners overhead and settled into a stance that defied the silk sari knotted at her waist. Gasps rippled, lace-gloved ladies winced at the dust swirling around her bare ankles. Their discomfort was fuel. It meant every soul present would see what followed. At last the colonel lifted the rupee high, commanding hush. Even insects seemed to pause. His arm snapped like a conductor's baton, flinging the coin skyward, Sunlight burst from its spinning surface, a miniature star freed from gravity, and for a breath from prejudice. Asha exhaled. Wood pressed against her cheek, steel nestled into shoulder, trigger tightening until movement dissolved into stillness. All vision collapsed to the coin's flashing arc, the hush of the crowd, the clenched fist of history itself. Time hung between thunder and lightning. The rifle waited, charged with every slight she had ever swallowed, every door slammed by someone who'd never seen her aim. Within a heartbeat, when pressure met breakpoint, the world would choose between echoing humiliation and echoing forever. Before the shot rings out. We're closing in on our first 500 subscribers, and your click can launch voices like Asha's into the spotlight. If this story has you leaning in, hit subscribe right now, give the video a like, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and a time you shattered someone's expectations. Your voice drives these narratives forward. Stay tuned. The moment after the trigger pull holds a twist you won't want to miss. The instant the trigger broke, thunder rolled across the range. Sharp, final, undeniable. Asha felt the recoil surge through bone and tendon, yet her gaze never left the sky. In that breathless sliver of time, the silver rupee hovered at the apex of its flight, spinning like a tiny planet under judgment. Then a puff of shimmering vapor blossomed. The coin fractured along a perfect meridian, two crescents pirouetting away from each other before gravity reclaimed them. Gasps ripped through the crowd, a single startled heartbeat echoed by 100 chests. Officers stiffened, parasols drooped, sepoys' eyes widened behind rigid facades. Even brass instruments, mid-phrase, faltered into silence, as though music itself needed a moment to absorb what brute disbelief could not shield. Powder smoke drifted in languid swirls around Asha's shoulders. She lowered the Lee Enfield with ritual care, its barrel glowing in afternoon glare like a brand pressed against prejudice. Somewhere on the packed earth, the two halves of the rupee landed with faint, separate chimes, splitting the hush as decisively as the bullet had split metal. Across the platform, the colonel stood motionless, metals glittering yet strangely small. His certainty had cracked. The fragments lay in the dust beside his coin. Everything he had declared immutable wavered in the trembling heat haze. The shot still rang inside startled hearts, asking one relentless question: if a single overlooked woman could shatter this myth, what other myths were waiting for their reckoning? Slowly, almost grudgingly, the colonel bent to retrieve the broken rupee. Sweat traced sharp lines through the polish of his conceit. When he straightened, his salute resembled surrender more than respect. Arm rigid, palm quivering, eyes refusing to meet hers for fear of what they might concede. He placed both silver fragments in Asha's open hand, the warmth of the metal seeping into her skin like a quiet apology from an empire. Whispers surged outward, through the officers' mess that evening, across cantonment barracks by dawn, into bazaars where news usually arrived shackled to authority. Men boasted of witnessing history, women retold the moment in tones that mixed disbelief with fierce delight. In distant villages where rifles were whispers of far-off power, little girls traced imaginary bullet paths across the night sky, dreaming of possibilities that weighed more than any coin. For the regiment, a pageantry designed to display colonial supremacy had inverted itself in a single shot. For Asha, the halves of the rupee became talismans, one kept beside her father's battered field journal, the other carried into every hunt, every new arena where doubt awaited. Each glint of torn silver reminded onlookers, and herself, that skill and worth do not answer to uniform, accent, or gender. Years later, storytellers would call it the day a bullet cut bigotry in two. The tale endured because it posed an unfinished challenge. How many coins, how many quiet certainties, still spin overhead, waiting for someone steady-eyed to bring them down? If that shot made your pulse race, imagine the ripples it left behind. We're sharing stories that pierce silence, but we need your help to keep firing. Smash that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell us in the comments where you first challenged a barrier that seemed unbreakable. Together, we turn echoes into change. One story, one click, one powerful community at a time. Collision.